Hello, this is Benjamin Fulford speaking on June 26, 2026. Something fundamental has changed at the very top of the Western power structure. There can be no doubt about this now. We finally got rid of Keir Starmer, and that is very important because this UK Prime Minister was blocking the change in control of the financial system because he was a front for a fake King Charles, and his removal is going to be a very good thing. But the battle is not yet over. They're going to try to replace him with a cutout, another person for the same clique. But what we really want is to replace the fake King Charles with the real King William. And then the idea is to have have a general election, and we're assuming the British people will select Nigel Farage as Prime Minister. At that point, we need to call for a new Bretton Woods conference to completely revamp the world financial system. Because right now, there could be no doubt whatsoever that it is controlled by criminals, especially now the high-tech companies. Let's think about it for a minute. They were censoring a lot of murder. For example, the Russian war, the Russian-Ukrainian war. They completely censored the fact that this was a joint Russian-Ukrainian Chabad genocide of the Ukrainian people. It was not a war. It was a genocide disguised as a war. And now we're hearing about 2.4 million Ukrainian men have been slaughtered, their women enslaved, and the country was turned into a slave market. It was a center for drugs, for weapons selling. They were taking all these military donations from the West and selling them for a profit. They were torturing kids for adrenochrome. They were organ harvesting. It was the absolute worst thing. And now it's looking like Poland and Hungary are going to declare war on Ukraine because they have become openly and brazenly Nazi and genocidal. However, it probably will not be necessary because Andriy Yermak, the real power behind the Zelensky regime, is in jail now. He was a front for the Soros people. A lot of the other people who were involved in this murder and the genocide are being removed, but we still need to go after the owners of the high-tech companies. Remember, they didn't just censor Russia. They censored the COVID vaccine mass murder. Me, for example, I was one of many people banned from YouTube for pointing out that the vaccines were dangerous, which is now proven. So they were hiding the truth in order to create mass murder. That's what Google is responsible for, as well as the other high-tech companies, and we must not forget that. And then the most recent example is the Iran war and the genocide in Gaza. This one they've had more trouble covering up, but it is clear that the ownership of the tech corporations, in fact, all of the Fortune 500, needs to be removed from the Rockefeller, Rothschild, Khazarian mafia and returned to the people it was stolen from. But that is going to happen. And the other thing, at this point, I'd like to say something about Freemasons. Freemasons, I'm not a Freemason, by the way, but I've been contacted by them. And Freemasons are like a double-edged sword. What happens is you have like a king or a ruler, and he sort of scouts the most influential people in society to create an informal control network. Now that can be used for evil or it can be used for other purposes, but clearly it's still at work. Take a look at this video of the puppet Zelensky shaking hands with various world leaders. Each time they get a Freemason handshake, they are subsequently removed from power, which is why it's interesting that Donald Trump refused to shake his hand when he went to the G7 last week.
Very well. Glad to see you. Glad to see you.
Yes.
Okay, let's stay here.
Some
At least for a moment.
Excellency, maybe a little handshake, please.
Okay. Yes.
Good, I think that's done.
Our delegation, Vice President, just
The U.S. delegation can follow this. Follow the Vice President, please.
So now let's talk about Donald Trump. It is clear from what he's doing and saying that this is not the same Trump who started the Iran war. The face is different, and more important, what his words and actions are different. He is calling Benjamin Netanyahu a con man and insulting him in other ways. He's saying similar stuff about Zelensky. More importantly, what's happening now is we're actually seeing the birth of a U.S.-Iranian military alliance. And this means the end of Israel. Israel is finished. And let's take a look at this clip of Benjamin Netanyahu saying Israel will stand alone.
I say to the leaders of the world, no amount of pressure, no decision by any international forum will stop Israel from defending itself. As the Prime Minister of Israel, the one and only Jewish state, I pledge here today from Jerusalem on this Holocaust Remembrance Day, if Israel is forced to stand alone, Israel will stand alone.
Well, no, they're not going to stand alone. They're going to fall alone. And that is going to happen. Because, well, listen to Colonel Douglas McGregor explain the situation.
Iran is on the road to becoming a great power. There's another great power in the neighborhood that is sitting on the sidelines. It's called Turkey. And the Turks have the largest military force. They also have substantial scientific industrial base, everything from nuclear power to steel production. They are in a position to engage. What do I mean by engage? As it becomes clear that Iran has won, and as we Americans disengage from the region, which we will do, we will pack up and we will get out. We are not going to go back into the Persian Gulf, pour billions of dollars into new facilities and new bases that we cannot protect. It's not going to happen. So we're going to pull out. When we pull out, Iran rises as the leading Islamic power. And it becomes clear that Israel is now largely on its own, and it too cannot protect itself any longer. The Turks will engage. What are the Turks going to do? Well, they're going to crush the Kurds. That's a permanent thorn in their sides. They want to get rid of it. Guess who else wants to be done with the Kurds? Iran. So you will have initially an alliance of convenience between the Iranians and the Turks, regarding, mutually shared threats. And that one threat that they would like to dispose of quickly is the Kurdish threat. And the Kurdish threat would not exist were it not for us, and more important, if it were not for Israel. Now, what happens to Israel? Well, my experience over there tells me, and I've been over there several times since 1999, that there are Israelis who are just as committed and determined to fight for their country as I am for mine or you would be for yours. But they're in the minority. And the majority of Israelis will say, that's it. We're leaving. Why would they leave? Because they will not live in an Israeli state that is assimilated into the region. In other words, they will not live under arrangements that they cannot dictate, that they cannot control, and that they cannot dominate. And if they can't dominate and control the region that they live in, thanks to us and our influence and military power, they'll go somewhere else. Now, where will that be? I have no idea. More than a few Israelis tell me, well, if it gets that bad, and we can't overcome the Turks and the Iranians and everybody else, well, we'll go to New York City. Well, that seems to be off the agenda now, given the Muslim mayor of New York City. So where will they go? I suppose they could go to Miami. They can go to Argentina. There are other places they could go besides that. But my point is, the truth is out there, and the truth is telling us that long term, right now, as I see the forces developing across the region and around the world, there's no future for Israel in the Middle East. That doesn't mean they're all going to die. It means exactly what I said, that over time it will vanish. Now, what about the rest of the world? Well, the rest of the world has watched what has happened to us, Stein, and they've said, well, these Americans have turned out to be incapable of coping with this new revolution in military power. They can't protect us. That means if you're in Japan, we can't protect the Japanese. If you're in Korea, we can't protect the Koreans. If you want to start a war over Taiwan's independence, you can't protect Taiwan. So that means we're probably going to be invited to leave most places where we currently garrison. In other words, this American military hegemony, which has become global in the last 80 years, is going to go away. Now, we've already seen the outlines of this departure in Europe. It hasn't gone, full-fledged in the sense that we're currently pulling forces out of Europe. And I think the handwriting's on the wall. We can't protect Europe from the kind of military power that we've seen employed in Iran, and the Russians have plenty of it. The Russians are actually the original creators of this ISR strike capability. You've got to go back to the 1970s. You look at the work of Marshal Ogarkov and his brain trust, especially Mahmoud Kareyev. These men put together everything that you've seen in Iran, only they envisioned something even more powerful and profound, and that was orbiting around the planet.
So he says that the Israelis who don't want to integrate with the region, don't want to become part of a multi-ethnic, multicultural society, will go elsewhere. I don't know where they're going to be able to go on this planet. A lot of them have set up a base in Patagonia, and they're hoping they'll find shelter in Argentina. But my view is that we must not let these mass murdering, genocidal criminals hide somewhere and then come back another day to, we must finish this off. We must liberate the Jewish people from their satanic overlords. And that is going to happen. But hopefully, if everything goes well with the White Hats winning, we'll have a Bretton Woods conference as early as this fall, once you have regime change in the UK, and that will lead to a return of the control of the financial system to democratically elected leaders, and also a revamp of the international system. And already 160 nations and international organizations are supporting a plan for a law-based, democratic, new international system that actually represents the people of the world. Because the United Nations is privately owned by the Rockefellers. They tried to use the WHO to turn this into an absolute dictatorship, and it's not going to happen. But the battle is still not over. So, for example, we still haven't had any Epstein arrests. And now it looks like Epstein Island is still owned by the same people. Take a look at this clip.
I just found out that Stephen Deckoff, the man who currently owns Epstein Island, he worked at Bear Stearns a few years after Epstein did. And he retained Epstein's property manager for the island, Ann Rodriguez, who has been charged with kidnapping recently. Somebody needs to investigate Stephen Deckoff immediately.
So we need to go after these people, okay? We can't let them just get away with mass murdering of children. It has to stop. There's no way it can continue. This is something the U.S. military really needs to get on the case. And the U.S. military also needs to have a purge of all the traders who sold out to Israel. Listen to this 20-year-old military, this 20-year military veteran talk about what happened to him when he posted, comments critical of the genocide in Gaza.
So after 20 years of service in the military, yesterday I got pulled into an officer's office and counseled for posts that I have on my social media. During the counseling, they told me I'm under investigation as a threat to national security. When I asked for proof, like what the posts were yesterday, they refused to give it to me. They made me come back today to further go over stuff. They gave me the proof, and the proof they gave me are anti-Israel posts. Now, when I joined the military, I took an allegiance to support the United States of America. I did not ever take an allegiance to support Israel. But yet, I am deemed a threat to national security because I do not support Israel and their genocide against the Palestinian people. Yes, you heard that right. I am deemed a threat to national security because I don't support Israel's genocide against the Palestinian people. Since when does not supporting a foreign nation get a U.S. soldier investigated for being a threat to national security?
So any military officer who is working for Israel needs to be removed from ASAP. And most of them are concentrated in the Army. There's very few in the Marines and Navy. There's quite a lot in the Air Force, but mostly in the Army. So that's where the purge has to take place in order for this to happen. The other thing people need to watch out for is the Israelis have systematically honey-trapped a lot of influential people. Before we get to the Israeli example, Japanese military intelligence told me that most of the students at Japanese military colleges ended up marrying Chinese honey traps. They didn't know about it, but they did. I mean, they pretended to be Japanese, and this is what happened. And since Israel controls most of the dating apps, it's a good bet that they've placed the honey traps in all sorts of key locations. Watch this clip about how they control the dating apps.
So I don't know if you guys have heard this story yet, but check this out. What if I told you that Israel controlled all of the dating apps and all the dating services, and they were using these as military weapons to infiltrate foreign governments? So they're using their dating apps to wait for politicians and government officials in foreign countries to get on the app. And then they were using that app to automatically match and pair them with specific individuals that were basically honeypots. And this is how they've been infiltrating and taking over third world countries. Check this shit out.
Download Tinder or join the resistance. Well, to Israel and the US military, that one's easy. Just keep swiping. And they made it a little obvious by running ads on Tinder in Lebanon from US CENTCOM in summer 2024. But the Tinder US military collab demonstrates the full spectrum of the Zionist military strategy. Not only do they want to occupy Lebanon, bomb Beirut into submission, and turn every Lebanese official into a traitor, they want to occupy the minds of the people, as many as possible, with the help of their militarized dating platforms. Tinder, the most popular dating app in the world, boasts over 75 million active users across 190 countries, is owned by Match Group, a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate that owns the largest market share of dating platforms, Hinge, Match.com, OkCupid, and others. And not only are they collecting massive amounts of data on their hundreds of millions of users, But Match Group's strategy and their technologies became fully militarized after Zionist billionaire investor and Trump donor Paul Singer and his Elliott management built a $1 billion stake in the company in January 2024. Paul Singer has long worked to integrate Israeli military tech into global markets, funding Startup Nation Central, a Tel Aviv-based nonprofit that works to promote Israeli tech and get Unit 8200 officers, Israel's elite military intelligence unit, hired at all major U.S. tech firms like Google, Microsoft, OpenAI, and others. And in February 2024, Match Group announced their partnership with OpenAI. In a press release written by ChatGPT, of course, Match Group named former Palantir board member Spencer Raskoff as their new CEO. Palantir, the U.S. spy firm that turned genocide into a game in Gaza with their artificial intelligence, and whose co-founder, Peter Thiel, struggled to answer the question of whether he thinks the human race should endure.
You're hesitating.
Yeah, well,
yes?
I don't know.
And it was the summer after Singer's cash infusion that Tinder was weaponized in Lebanon to discourage resistance against Israel's continued genocidal assault. But Match Group says that they are just on a mission to create meaningful connections. So do you believe it? Do you believe that the company who's integrated OpenAI across all their dating platforms, installed a former Palantir board member as their CEO, and ran U.S. military ads on Tinder, all seemingly at the behest of a Zionist billionaire, just wants to help you find love? Or are these dating platforms just another way to occupy our minds, getting users to engage in endless swiping and scrolling on their compulsively addictive platforms, all the while extracting massive amounts of data and blackmail material, and making us wholly incapable of seeing other human beings as little more than something to swipe right or left on? And what kind of meaningful connection can be made from a screen anyways? So you actually have to pick a side. It's either Tinder or the resistance.
So I can speak from personal experience about honey traps, and this is what I know. If a beautiful woman approaches you at some place where it's been previously announced you're going to show up and offers herself to you, that's almost certainly a honey trap. Okay, beautiful women don't chase you. You're supposed to chase them. So if they act unnaturally or if they're definitely out of your league, and let's be realistic, what sort of woman you can actually get, and watch out, because the honey part is nice, but then the trap will kill you, and that's something people need to watch out for. So the purge still needs to continue, but the battle is going very well, but it's definitely not over. I've been looking at the situation in Venezuela. They had this huge earthquake, and it was the epicenter was only 10 kilometers deep, which is suspicious. And then I looked in the news, and it looks like Venezuela said they're not going to pay $240 billion that the Khazarian mafia says it owes them. So as soon as they say, hey, we're not going to pay the $240 billion you're asking for, they get hit with an earthquake weapon. We need to take the control of these weapons away from these people. It's the weather weapons and the earthquake weapons are the things they still have that we need to do something about, and that may involve sending troops to Antarctica to take out some of these bases where the weather warfare equipment is located. But that needs to be done. Now, another issue I wish to talk about is the situation in South Africa, because I was asked by a listener last week and I didn't have an answer. I did a bit of research. It looks like South Africa is having their own version of the illegal immigrant crisis that hit Europe and the United States. They have 40% unemployment, and South Africa is relatively rich compared to other parts of Africa, and it's been flooded with Nigerians, Malawians, and there's 40% unemployment. So there's been a spontaneous reaction, and mobs are attacking the foreigners who've come into that country. So definitely, it's a very unstable situation, but it does look like the South Africans have had enough. And the thing is, migration needs to be legal and needs to be done in such a way that it benefits the society. So we want to have, for example, Canada, we want to have nurses and engineers. What we don't want to have is military-age young males who don't even have a high school diploma who are leading to a rise in crime, because that's what we're seeing, and this is almost certainly deliberate. It's not something that we should have allowed. But in any case, getting back to the situation in Europe and the United States, it does look like the Habsburg dynasty, that's the King of Spain, whose cousin is Prince William, and then the people controlling Hungary, are making a move to remove Satanists from the very top levels of Western power, and this is why we were seeing a new Trump and the Starmer's out. When we see Friedrich Merz removed from Germany, that'll be a sign that the battle is well underway. And I'm assuming that Macron and the French Rothschilds will be the last to surrender, but they're already asking for permission to, leave to the Kerguelen Islands and go into self-exile. So that will happen. And when that happens, we can have a financial system whose purpose is not to create a greater Israel and kill 90% of the world and enslave the rest, which is what the people who control the financial system have been doing up until now. Instead, we'll have people who do what people want. What do people want? They want to be richer, they want to live longer, they want to be healthier, they want to be happier, and that's the sort of thing that will start happening. And this will mean major reforms. It's not going to be easy, but the medical system, for example, will once again make it be structured so that the healthier people get, the longer they live, the more money doctors make. Right now, it's the opposite. Doctors are actually paid to make people sick, and that's what they do. And so the system will have to be changed, and everything will be much better. We're gonna have, but it's gonna require a big international meeting. It's got to be public. It's not, but at the high level with the assassinations and the arrests and everything, a tipping point has been reached. The white hats are in charge of the military now, and they've done it in the UK now as well. And China also had a big purge. It's not been in the news, but most of their top military were removed because they were corrupted by the cabal, and the total surveillance society that China was becoming is being changed, and it's a much more benevolent group in power now. So that has changed, and it hasn't been seen. But I expect things to move a bit sideways over the summer, but I'm pretty sure that if we all keep pushing, make sure that Starmer is not replaced by another member of the same cabal, then things will happen very quickly. And the UK has had, 7 prime ministers in 10 years? That's a sign of a failed state. In other words, the same group puts in another person following the same agenda with, increases in illegal immigration and all the economic mismanagement. It's just going to lead to more collapse. So something fundamental has to change, and that means a general election will have to be held. So let's push for that. Let's make sure that Farage or someone like him is there, and there could be genuine reform. And the United States, too, needs to go through a formal bankruptcy so that we can take over the ownership of the corporations temporarily, at least the ones that were controlled by the Khazarian mafia. And that process is happening anyway. They were pushing very, very hard for AI as a kind of Hail Mary, control grid. They wanted to control our minds. That's what this AI was about. But the IPO of SpaceX has kind of popped that bubble. They've lost, $600 billion in so-called market value recently. They should lose a lot more, but already the other AI companies are giving up on their IPOs, so that bubble has burst. And the other thing that's happening is Saudi Arabia has been isolated, and their control of the oil industry and OPEC's control of the oil industry has shifted, and we're now actually seeing a military alliance between the U.S. and Iran. And this has been good for the U.S. in a lot of ways. For one thing, together with the Iranians, they can get a lot of control back over the oil industry. The other thing that is happening is that the Middle East will have peace finally, and Israel will be replaced by the nation state of Judea. Right now, the Iranian military and the U.S. military are talking. The U.S. military will leave the region, and then the Turks and the Iranians will take care of the situation. But things are going pretty well overall. However, this summer is probably going to be hard for a lot of people because the system hasn't yet completely collapsed, and it can only rebuild once these people are fully and finally removed. But that is going to happen, I promise you. Okay, well, that's what I have to say for myself. Now I'd like to answer questions from readers and viewers.
Hi, Ben. We have our first question for today. We're hearing a lot about riots going on right now in Paris, France, as well as a big push by a lot of Europeans across Europe to push these migrants out. What are your thoughts on this, and do you think the Europeans will take back their home from these invaders?
Well, the Europeans have already signed a 30-day deportation law, and they've closed a loophole that allowed people who were given deportation orders to go from France to Germany and then drop off the radar. And now there's nowhere in Europe they can hide. So, yeah, I mean, military-aged men who are not European and who are not working should be kicked out and returned to their countries. They were brought in for nefarious reasons, and they need to remove. If they have a job and they're contributing to society, then I think they should be allowed to stay. But if they're just hanging around on street corners or mooching off welfare, they should be kicked out. It's about time. And it'd be better if the governments did more, but that will happen. And it's going to happen in the UK, too, because things have gone way overboard there with these Muslim rape gangs and all that other stuff that's been happening. This is not what Europe is about. And it's a good thing. And you know, I'm in favor of immigration when you're getting people who have skills that we don't have, who can contribute to society and, you know, provide us with new types of food and all the other good things, but not these huge influx of military age, low education males. That was deliberate social sabotage, and the sooner they're removed, the better. And I hope Germany has a change in government soon, so they can Germany can once again be ruled by the Germans. Next question.
Hi, Ben. I've heard that Zelensky is dead. He had apparently died in a Russian aerial attack. Have you heard anything about this, and do you believe that Zelensky is really dead?
I'll have to make inquiries, but what I do know is that, you know, I've seen pictures of like 10 different Zelenskys. So it's really an actor reading a script. But what I do know is that the mafia around him have been arrested, including Supreme Court judges. So something, you know, the Ukraine is being cleaned up. But I'll ask if the actual Zelensky was killed or not. British intelligence should know. I'll let you. I'll revert. Next question.
Hi, Ben. I'd like to hear your thoughts on the modern-day state of Israel, given the history of how they were formed and how they had originally stolen land from the Palestinians that brought them into their home in the 1950s. Should Israel even exist in its current state?
No. My belief is that Israel should be replaced by a multi-ethnic, multi-religious state of Judea, which would include full rights to the original Judeans, who are misleadingly called Palestinians, and the Jews who wish to stay will be allowed to live in peace, but the genocidal people will have to face war crimes tribunals. That's my view. But no, Israel should not continue as it is. It's a racist state, and it's now widely recognized as the main source of terrorism and evil on this planet. These are Satan worshippers. They're not Jews, and they should be dealt with. Next question.
Hi, Ben. You often take up the P2, P3, Freemason, and Black Sun. but could you please expose the dialogue of Peter Thiel? Members may include seemingly white hats.
Yeah, I've got a list of the members of this, and it's people like Jared Kushner, Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, Ted Cruz, and I think this is the group that was pushing for the AI Mark of the Beast digital control system. But the fact that Thiel has fled to Argentina and Kushner has been looking for a underground base to hide in, and the fact that their names have been hacked and published shows that this group is no longer in charge. But I am looking into it. But a lot of people have been exposing it, and once they're exposed, that's it. It's game over. And also, I have a personal grudge against the whole PayPal people, because they shut down my site. They stole $15,000 from me. And as far as I'm concerned, they're criminals and they belong in jail. Oh, speaking about people belong in jail, you may have noticed that my site was misleadingly labeled as having a harmful virus. This is slander, and the people who were responsible for this will face justice, because by trying to cover up the real news about the world, they're basically working for mass murderers, and that means that they will face war crimes tribunals. Next question.
Ivan, we have our last question for today. You mentioned earlier that the Trump in office is not the same Trump that started the Iranian war. Do you believe now that this is the real Trump that was elected in 2016?
What it is that it's the faction. No, I mean, the Trump who existed until June of 2025 was 6'3", was quite handsome, and what's happened though is that the Trump we see now is following the agenda of the real Trump. So the people who are behind the real Trump have taken back control of the U.S. Commander-in-Chief's office, and they're going back to the agenda of the original White Hat Trump. So he is a spokesperson for the White Hats, but he's definitely not the same person. He's just representing the same group and following the same agenda. Okay, well, that's what I have to say for myself for this week, and I hope to see you again next week.